Hello, this is our Chapter 5 presentation over Latinos and/or Hispanics. I am Arely Rocha, joined by my team members Jose Varela and Alexis Villarreal. Our agenda for today includes going over the history of several Latinos, including Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and Dominicans. Afterwards, we'll discuss the importance of diversity in the workplace organizations. Then we will go over employment experiences that Latinos endure. Then we will discuss Hispanic immigrants at work. Then we will talk about the growing Latino consumer market. Then about individual measures to improve experiences at work for Hispanics. Then our seventh topic will go over organizational methods to improve experience at work for Hispanics. Then we will have a knowledge assessment and finally our conclusion and references. So our first slide is about history of Mexicans. The history of Mexicans begins with the earliest records of Mexican American ancestors coming from before the Europeans even invaded or settled in America. After the Mexican American War, Mexicans were given the option to stay in what was now Land of America and become American. However, staying and becoming American did not guarantee them equal rights. During the Great Depression, President Hoover authorized for Mexicans to be repatriated to Mexico, which basically means that they were forced to leave the country. Some did leave voluntarily, but most of them were forced to leave. This happened because the president wanted to free up jobs for more Americans, and about 500,000 to 2 million Mexicans were affected. The picture on the right shows the Mexicans being forced to leave with their few belongings, with whatever they could take, with what was at hand. Moving on, during World War II, there was a large-scale migration to the US from Mexicans. And a case that is of importance in Mexico history that we want to highlight is the Mendez versus Westminster School District, because it made it illegal for schools to segregate Mexican children. Okay, our next slide is about the history of Puerto Ricans. So Puerto Ricans currently make up about 9% of the US Hispanics. And an act that we want to highlight that we think is of importance to their history is the Jones Act of 1917. This act extended citizenship to those who were born in either US land or Puerto Rico. Many Puerto Ricans are diverse in race and bilingual, and they also, usually most of them have dual citizenship, which makes it a lot easier for them to travel within the US. Although Puerto Ricans are citizens now, they do have a history of slavery, which was abolished in 1873, a history of racial segregation, color bias, and classism. Okay, moving on. The history of Cubans. The history of Cubans in the US begins in the history of Cubans in the US begins when they first came in 1959 after Fidel Castro gained governmental control of Cuba. Most of the Cubans that came from that first migration, 50% of them landed in Miami, and now today, about half of the current Cuban population in the US resides in Miami still. The Cubans that first came to the US were usually wealthy and middle class, and they brought most of their belongings or whatever they could. However, the Cubans that later followed them did not bring much with them because of restrictions and limitations that Castro placed of what could be taken out of the country. Most of the Cubans that also came were usually white, And this was because Black Cubans were scared of being discriminated against in the US. And finally, a lot of help was given to Cubans by the federal government in the US, and this resulted in them being one of the most financially and economically successful Hispanic group in the US today. Most of the Cubans that were coming to America were already wealthy and were usually doctors, lawyers, but in the US, since they did gain a lot of help from the government, they were able to become even more financially successful than other Hispanic and Latino groups out there. Our next slide talks about the history of Dominicans. The history of Dominicans starts in the US starts in 1965. This was when the US invaded Dominican Republic to try to stop a civil war that was happening over there. And this resulted in large migrations of Dominicans to come over to the US. As of today, more than 2 million Dominicans live here, and it makes them the fifth largest Latino group in the US. Dominicans also experienced the same racism and prejudice as Black Americans, and this was mainly because of their noticeable Afro-Hispanic descent. This next video that we want to show you discusses the importance of diversity in the workplace.
ABC News is celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, honoring the contributions and history of Americans with roots in Spain, Mexico, Central and South America, and the Caribbean. And today we're talking about the importance of inclusivity in the workplace. The global head of diversity, inclusion, and belonging at LinkedIn, Rosanna Durruti, joins me now live for more on this. Thank you so much, Rosanna Durruti, for being here with us. Why is having a diverse workplace so important?
I think companies compete not only to create the best products and services for their customers, but the access to that really comes through having a workplace that's filled with talent, that's innovative, creative, and inspires greater productivity. We see changing demographics in the United States. For the Latino population, as we talk about Hispanic Heritage Month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us that in 2028, 21% of the workforce will be Latino. So creating an environment that's inclusive certainly enables companies to be more competitive, not only in attracting the best talent, but retaining that talent.
Now, you're an Afro-Latina, a queer leader there at LinkedIn. What has your personal experience been like?
You know, I think like any individual, we have identities that we're born into that are a part of our life. And so what's true about the Latino population is it's a multidimensional population. I've been fortunate recognizing that being born into a culture that's given me a second language. It's a very rich culture, but also being, Black and gay, it's very clear to me that living at the intersection of these identities has inspired the work that I do to create more equitable workplaces and to help people realize their full potential. I certainly have been, I think it's been to my advantage to have these different identities, to understand the challenges that are faced by these identities as well, but also the wealth of riches that comes from very rich cultures and from experiences that certainly help my company create solutions for a variety and diversity of audiences.
So, Rosanna, there is a 2021 Pew Research report that showed 62% of Hispanics say having darker skin hurts their ability to get ahead in the U.S. So how does colorism impact people of color in the workplace, and why is it necessary for employers to acknowledge those complexities and nuances?
Colorism is a form of bias that certainly affects a large group of individuals. The Latino community is not only about the diverse ethnicities and nationalities, but the diverse races that are a part of our culture. And certainly we know that bias creates stress. It's a preventable challenge for organizations. Colorism impedes the ability of individuals to realize their full potential when judgments are made about their abilities. And that's true for any individual who's multiracial or appears a particular race.
All right, Rosanna DeRuthi, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so we just wanted to show this video to emphasize the importance of diversity in the workplace, and so you guys could see how it's not just about race, but also about like she's LGBT and she's still Latino. So next slide. Our next slide is about employment experiences. So most employment experiences are about access and treatment discrimination. So studies show Hispanics face obstacles in getting access to interviews and jobs that white candidates can easily acquire. For example, Hispanics can be told that there are no jobs available, but when white applicants called back, they were scheduled for interviews. Resumes with Hispanic names will also often be passed on just because of their name. So this isn't really fair, and it's just discrimination against them. And it limits their access to even applying for a job. They don't even have the opportunity to apply for it just because of their name. Next slide. Our next slide talks about Hispanic immigrants at work. So Hispanics account for half of foreign-born workers in the US. Even Hispanics who are US citizens are affected by the bias that all Hispanics are undocumented immigrants. And they will even sometimes be passed up on opportunities because of this. Undocumented Hispanics can experience exploitation in the workplace with low wages, long hours, dangerous jobs, and no overtime. Businesses will use underpaying undocumented immigrants to keep their costs and prices low. Overall, businesses sometimes view undocumented Hispanics as basically cheap labor. Our next slide is about the growing Latino consumer market. So this is basically that Hispanics have been increasing their buying power from 504 billion in 2000 to 2.6 trillion in 2018. Studies show that Hispanics will spend more on shopping and prefer paying cash versus on credit. Studies also show that Hispanics will spend on average $800 more a year on clothing compared to all other ethnic groups. Organizations that are wanting to tap into the Hispanic market are using media such as Univision and People en Español as marketing tools to get to Hispanics. Even with a strong presence in the consumer market, there are still a lot of discrimination against Hispanics, as noted in examples from Fort Worth, Texas, and Conoco. We also included this next video because we think it highlights Latinos in the workplace, which we think is so important, so we wanted to share this with you.
I think Latino employees contribute a lot to the workplace, specifically during open enrollment, just making sure we have that personal touch with the Latino community. We're going out there speaking their language, kind of knowing their traditions, having that personal touch with them. Not only that, being available to answer phone calls, answer questions, having bilingual nurses that can really understand them, not only at a healthcare level, but also at a personal level.
Latinos have unique healthcare needs. Overall, they're a healthier population and they're a younger population. But we know that when they get a chronic condition, for instance, that they have higher morbidity and mortality, which means that they have higher complications and unfortunately higher death rates. So it's important for us to be able to develop products and services that are culturally competent, that are meeting the needs to make them healthier.
We are fully committed to our work. We have work ethic that comes from years and years of trying to breach the gap between where we come from and how we're going to establish ourselves as strong forces of work for the organizations that we serve. So that loyalty and that commitment brings a dedication to what we do.
One of the things that really has helped us throughout the years is understanding what the specific needs of Latinos are. Down to, again, going back to the very rarely going to the doctor, maybe feeling like, it's not needed or we're going to try another way. And employees that are here within the company allow us to be able to tap into them as resources and really get an idea of what is that culture like? What are some of the preventing factors?
I think growing up, you never went to the doctor unless you were seriously ill. And that's a stigma that we have to overcome. And I think as a culture, we've done a better job of doing that. My dad's a great example. When we were growing up, he would never go to the doctor unless he couldn't physically get up and go to work. Now we've tried to position it as don't do it for yourself as much as you're doing it for the family. We want to make sure that he's around for all these great special occasions that we can celebrate as a family, and he's really starting to come around.
Okay, the next slide is about individual measures to prove experience at work for Hispanics. So some of the measures that an individual can take is obtaining as much education as one can to help excel in job and career. Another is finding employers who hire diversely and who have members in management of different ethnic backgrounds and which could give you more opportunities to progress in your job. And finally, another one is personal efforts to become fluent in English, because this would just be easier to find a job as the most commonly used language in America is English. Our next slide talks about the organizational methods to improve experience at work for Hispanics. Some methods that can be taken include having zero tolerance for discrimination policies, having proactive measures such as recruiting from Latino schools, Latino jobs, marketing or referrals, providing ESL training and programs to help employees learn English, and not making assumptions or decisions for employees based on their ethnic backgrounds and base these on performance and qualifications instead. And finally, it is time for our knowledge assessment for our audience. Our first question is true or false. So many Puerto Ricans are perceived as Black by Americans. We'll give you a few seconds to get your answer. Okay, the correct answer is false. So many Dominican people are noticeably Afro-Hispanic, not Puerto Ricans. Our next question is, during the Great Depression, how many Mexican Americans were repatriated back to Mexico? A, 500K to 2 million, B, 500K to 1.5 million, C, 900K to 2.5 million, or D, 850K to 1 million. Again, we'll give you a few seconds to get your answer. Okay, the correct answer was A, 500K to 2 million. Finally, our last question is, which of the following has higher education and brings in the most income? A, Mexicans, B, Puerto Ricans, C, Cubans, or D, Dominicans? The correct answer is, oh my God, sorry. We'll give you a few seconds to get your answer. Okay, sorry. The correct answer is C, Cubans. And finally, this is our little conclusion video of the overall importance of having Latinos in the workplace and what we wanted to like overall emphasize on them.
We as a population are at the pinnacle of being recognized and acknowledged in American society. We are finally at all levels of society as far as opportunities for businesses, opportunities for wealth generation, opportunities for home ownership. And that just continues to grow. So I feel being Latino in 2021 is really a pinnacle time of pride and inspiration. Hispanic Heritage Month is an opportunity for the rest of America to recognize and appreciate and acknowledge all of the contributions Latinos or Hispanics have brought and given to American society.
Okay, these are our references. And with that, we conclude our presentation. Thank you.